Chapter 18, Paris. When had it happened, and what exactly had happened? There were surprises everywhere. One of them was Laurel herself. Once again, she had undergone a shattering experience, yet remained unshattered. Her resilience was remarkable and heartening. The proximity of death had only heightened emotions already latent within them. Fear was one of them, but there were others too. More and more he found he had started to think in the first-person plural. There was an us where there had once been merely a me. It was a thing compounded of words and looks, of shared emotions, both exhilaration and despondency, of pain and respite from pain, and quiet laughter. It was a thing of gossamer, and he knew of nothing stronger. It seemed a small miracle. They created a normalcy where none had existed. They conversed as if they had known each other for years. Asleep in bed, he grew aware of this last night. Their bodies cupped each other's naturally, limbs gently interlaced as if they had been made for it. When their bodies coupled in love-making, there was bliss, and, at moments, there was something even more elusive, something very like serenity. "You make me feel safe," Laurel said, after a while, as they lay together beneath the sheets. "Is it insulting to be told that?" "No, though it might be tempting fate," Ambler replied with a small smile. He had, in fact, thought about changing hotels and decided against it. The risks of a new registration at a new establishment exceeded the risks of maintaining the old. "But then you already knew that's how I felt, didn't you?" Ambler did not reply. "It's funny," she said. "I feel like you know everything there is to know about me, even though that can't really be." "My Ariadne," he thought. "My beautiful Ariadne. There are facts and there are truths. I don't know the facts, maybe, though I know a few truths." "Because of the way you see," she said. "It must make some people uncomfortable, that sense of being seen through." She paused. "I guess I ought to feel that way too, like my slip is showing, only 1,000 times worse. But I don't. Never have. It's the darndest thing. Maybe I don't care if my slip is showing around you. Maybe I want you to see me for what I am. Maybe I'm tired of being looked at by men who just see what they want to see. Being seen through is almost a treat." "There's a lot to look at," Ambler said, smiling and pulling her close. She interlaced her fingers with his again. "It reminds me of what kids say sometimes. I know that you know that I know that you know." A slow smile appeared on her face, as if the smile on Ambler's face had spread to hers. "Tell me something about myself." "I think you're one of the most sensitive people I've ever met," Ambler said steadily. "You should get out more," she grinned. "When you were a girl, you were different from the others, weren't you? Maybe a little bit on the outside of things. Not an outsider exactly, but you maybe had an ability to see things that others didn't, including yourself. The ability to, pull the camera back a little bit." Laurel was not smiling any longer. She was looking at him now, transfixed. "You're a caring person, an honest one too, but you have a hard time letting people in, letting people know the real Laurel Holland. Once you finally do let somebody in, though, it's pretty much for keeps as far as you're concerned. You're loyal that way. You don't form friendships fast, but when you form them, they are fast and strong, because they're for real, not for show. And sometimes maybe you wish that you could form personal relationships more easily, that you could slip in and out of them the way other people do." Ambler paused. "Is this making sense to you?" She nodded silently. "I think you're a deeply trustworthy person, not a saint. You can be selfish. You can have a temper too, sometimes, and lash out at people close to you. But when it really counts, you're there. You understand the importance of being a good friend. It's important to you that you seem in control, but often you don't feel that way. It's almost an act of will, of discipline, to keep yourself calm and in command of situations which also means being in command of yourself. She blinked slowly but remained silent. There have been times in the past when you've been too honest with your feelings, Ambler went on, when you felt that you revealed too much of yourself, and that's made you a little cautious sometimes, even a little reserved. Laurel took a deep breath, let it out unsteadily. There's just one thing you missed, or maybe you were too polite to mention, she said quietly. There was a catch in her voice. Her eyes were inches from his, and he could see her pupils widen. Ambler pressed his mouth to hers and took her in his arms, a long, slow embrace that was almost an act of love-making in itself. There are some things that don't need to be put in words, he whispered after a while, and he sensed, he knew, that the glow that suffused him also suffused her, brightening, warming, like a dawn within them. Later, as they lay together, bodies slick with sweat and sheets almost randomly intertwined with limbs, she gazed at the ceiling and spoke. My dad was a Vietnam vet, she said, sounding far away. A good man, I think, but damaged, almost like my husband got to be. You might think I was drawn to that type, but I don't think so. It was just my lot in life. He hit your mom? Never, she said sharply. Never. He would have lost her forever if he raised a hand to her even once, and he knew it too. People talk about uncontrollable rages. Very few of them are really uncontrollable all the way. The tide sweeps up the beach, but it won't go past the sandbags. Most people have sandbags of a sort in their lives. The things you won't say, the things you won't do. My dad grew up on a dairy farm, and if he had his druthers, he'd have had me raised with a milk pail in my hands. But he had a family to support, and there were certain economic realities to be faced, so I grew up in a subdivision in Virginia, outside of Norfolk. He worked in an electrical equipment plant. Mom worked as a receptionist at a doctor's office. Maybe something else that drew you to the medical profession. The suburbs of the medical profession, anyway. Laurel closed her eyes for a moment. The place where I grew up wasn't much of anything, but it had a good school district, and that's something they cared about. Good arts program, I guess. They thought I'd do well there. Mom cared a lot about that, maybe too much. You could tell she used to think Dad was going to make more of himself than he ever did. She kept telling him to ask for a raise, a promotion. Then one day she ended up talking to some people at the plant. It might have been a bake sale at the school, some event like that. And, well, I didn't put it together right away, but I guess she was led to understand that the plant was only keeping Dad on the payroll in the first place out of kindness, his Vietnam service and all. So a promotion wasn't really in the cards. Mom changed a little after that. I think she was sad at first and then businesslike, like she'd just given up on him, but she'd made her bed and had to lie in it. Which left you. As a vehicle for hoping? Yeah. A trace of bitterness entered her voice. And when I won my first Oscar and thanked her in front of 1 billion television viewers, well, you can see how all her dreams came true. She's dead, isn't she? Ambler said gently. They both are. I guess she was never prouder than when they saw me play Maria in the high school production of West Side Story, Laurel said, her voice thickening. Ambler saw that her eyes had grown moist. She turned to him, but in her voice was the distance of something old, newly recollected. I can still hear my dad hooting and whistling when the curtain came down and stamping his foot. But it was when they were driving home that it happened. You don't have to say it, Laurel. Tears were rolling down her cheeks, dampening the pillow beneath her head. There was an icy patch on some intersection and a municipal trash hauler fishtailed there, and Dad just wasn't paying attention. He'd had a couple of beers, and they were both happy, and he was driving a company truck when he plowed into the van, and it was filled with electrical equipment. The truck stopped. The equipment kept flying forward, crushed them both. They were in the hospital in a coma for another 2 days, and then they both gave out, died within the very same hour. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to clear the wetness from them, striving to regain control. Maybe it changed me, maybe it didn't, but it became part of me, you know, a drop of dioxin in the watershed. The wound had been bandaged and healed by time, Ambler knew, but it was not the kind of wound that could ever heal fully. Ambler knew, too, exactly why it was important to her that he know. She wanted him to know her, needed him to know her, not just who she was, but how she became who she was. Her very identity was what she sought to share with him. It was an identity that was composed of 100,000 mosaic tiles, 100,000 incidents and memories, and yet was unitary all the same, a single, unquestioned thing. An entity that was hers. No, an entity that was her. Ambler felt a churning sense of something he did not immediately recognize as envy. Beijing. Was it possible to enjoy protection without suffering isolation? It was something of a koan, thought President Liu Eng. Certainly the city within a city, that was the Zhongnanhai, often seemed isolated to him. Like the Emperor Kwang-su in his splendid captivity, the president wondered whether he was not dwelling in a gilded, or anyway lacquered, cage. Yet it would be selfish not to take some elementary precautions. The stakes were greater than his individual life. By the same token, however, he could never consent to the crippling suggestion that he demur from overseas appearances, such as his upcoming presentation at the World Economic Forum. If he were to heed the counsel of fear, he would lose the momentum that was necessary for his reforms to succeed. The president's gaze drifted out the window. In winter, the North Lake and the South Lake looked glazed, dull, like the eyes of a slain giant, Liu Eng thought. They made him shiver. Familiarity could not dull the ominous pulse of history. Yes, his greatest concern had to be the security of his agenda, his legacy, rather than of his life. It would be a fool's compact to sacrifice the first on the altar of the second. If his death could usher in the new era of freedom and democracy he so ardently wished for, he hoped he would have the physical courage to accept it. At the moment, however, it appeared that his continued existence was more likely to secure such an arrangement. He hoped this belief was not mere vanity. Besides, if he were to succumb to vanity, there was always the Jiahua de Nongmin to correct him. Everyone feared the wily peasant's sharp tongue, particularly sharp, some wag said, because of the long years he spent having bitten it. But the Jiahua de Nongmin no longer feared anyone. The youthful president looked at the familiar faces who had gathered around the black lacquered table. Familiar faces with familiar-looking worry lines. Chao Tang of the Ministry of State Security, 2nd Bureau, was looking especially sober-sided this morning. We have new intelligence, he was saying. True or just new? Liu Eng asked slightly. Both, I fear. Comrade Chao was not in a joking mood, but then he seldom was. From a slender leather portfolio, he withdrew a number of photographs, showing them to Liu Eng before passing them to the others. Here is the man they call Tarquin, Comrade Chao said, in Canada at the meeting of the G7 a couple of days ago. You will notice the timestamp on this photograph. Just a few minutes previously, a member of the European delegation was assassinated. Kurt Solinger, a friend of ours, economically speaking, someone who was working hard on an economic agreement that would have facilitated trade between this country and the European Union. The soft-spoken man who sat to Liu Eng's left, his special advisor on domestic security matters, shook his head glumly. When the wood owl kills the chicken, the good farmer must take up arms against the wood owl. I thought wood owls were extinct, the president said wryly. Not yet, but soon if precautions aren't taken. You have that in common, snorted One-Sai, the president's aging, peppery mentor, his large eyes blinking through his wire-rimmed glasses. And here is another photograph of Tarquin, Comrade Chow resumed, taken in the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris, minutes before the IAEA Director General Benoit Duchesne was shot dead. Dr. Duchesne, as it happens, was preparing an arms inspection report that would have cleared this regime of the canard that we have been contributing to nuclear proliferation. The soft-spoken security advisor looked even more distressed. Here is an assassin who has the future security of China itself in his sights. The vital question, Luang said, is why? That is optimistic. The vital question may be when. Comrade Chow laid 2 photographs of Tarquin side by side. Here is a magnification of Tarquin taken at the Changhua incident. Here he is again in Canada. Why, they are different men, the president said. No, Comrade Chow said, our analysts have scrutinized the images for those aspects of physiognomy that cannot be altered, such as the distance between the eyes, the distance from eye to mouth, and so forth. And they have concluded that this is the same man. He changed his appearance, obviously, in an attempt to elude his enemies. Some reports say he had plastic surgery and has gone rogue. Other reports insist that he remains in the employ of his government. There are many ways of working for one's government, said the Jiahua de Nongmin grimly. President Luang glanced at his watch. I appreciate the update, gentlemen, he said, but I cannot be late for my meeting with the PLA Industrial Committee. They will take it poorly. He stood and with a quick bow excused himself. The meeting, however, did not adjourn. Let's return to the president's question, One-Sai said. It is not to be brushed aside. Quite simply, why? Why is indeed an important question, said the white-haired man, known as the wily peasant, turning to Comrade Chow. In particular, why is the assassin still alive? When we last met, you said you had taken measures. Perhaps he's even wilier than you, Comrade Chow said softly. Paris. The 14th arrondissement, which extends from the Boulevard de Montparnasse, was once favored by the American community in Paris. Yet Ambler doubted that this was why Fenton had chosen the area for his safe house, or at least one of his safe houses, for Ambler suspected he owned many. Through the usual maze of one-way streets, the arteries conveyed a steady stream of traffic bound to Orly and the industrial districts farther to the south. Protesters, a genus as defining of Paris as the homeless are of New York, had long favored Denfert-Rochereau at the intersection of the major arteries. But even the less trafficked streets offer an array of Breton creperies, nightclubs, and cafes. One had to go farther into the arrondissement before one reached the quiet residential neighborhoods. 45 Rue Poulenc was in one such. Fenton had given Ambler the address when they spoke in Montreal. It was where Ambler was to report in following the Duchesne's assignment. After his one visit, the Strategic Services Branch Office was declared strictly out of bounds. 45 Rue Poulenc was striking only in its drabness. It might have been taken for the office of a local professional, an optician or a dentist. Dusty Venetian blinds were visible in the stoop-level window. In other windows, one could see spider plants hanging from planters' cheerless attempts to establish good cheer. Ambler buzzed and then waited for nearly a minute, during which his visage was doubtless being scrutinized either through the peephole or by means of a hidden camera. A low thrumming indicated that the door was opened. He turned the knob and walked into the carpeted foyer. There was no one visible in the hallway. A narrow staircase on the right was covered with an expensive-looking runner, held in place with brass rods at the corner of each tread and riser. He heard a voice through an intercom near the base of the staircase, Fenton's voice, his baritone sounding tinny through the small speakers. "I'm downstairs, end of the hall." Ambler made his way through an unlocked door and down another narrow staircase. At the landing, he saw a closed pair of double doors and knocked. Paul Fenton opened the door and brought him into what looked like a scholar's study. Every available surface was lined with books, not the kind bought for decor, but the kind that had been put to serious use. Books with fraying spines, many faded by the years. "Have a seat," Paul Fenton said bluffly. He gestured toward a wheeled office stool and then sat down on a metal folding chair nearby. "Love what you've done to the place," Ambler said. He was oddly calm. The ambulance had been stowed in an automatic parking garage. Nobody at Hotel Beaubourg glanced at them twice when they returned. Just like that, they had been immersed in utter normality again. Now, entering the billionaire's quietly bizarre empire, Ambler just felt numb. "You laugh," Fenton replied, "but it's a nearly exact replica of Pierre Dupre's office at the Collège de France. Upstairs, it's an almost perfect replica of the office of a Montparnasse dentiste. Could be a film set. I had 2 of our technicians do it just to see whether it could be done. Wasn't easy, I can tell you." "They say 2 heads are better than 1, Ambler said, swiveling slowly on his vinyl-topped stool. "I suppose you figure that 2 pairs of hands are better than 1. "How's that?" With studied nonchalance, Ambler turned to face the mogul fully. "I was just surprised that you decided to post a second gunman at the Luxembourg Gardens without telling me. I mean, you may have considered it a backup feature, but in my opinion, it's operationally unsound. I might have taken out your guy by mistake, misidentified him as a hostile." "Not following," Fenton said with a mildly quizzical expression. Ambler bore down on him. "I'm just saying I don't work with backups if I don't know about them." "What backups?" Ambler studied Fenton's features for any flicker of dissembling, for the faintest twitch of tension. There was none whatever. "And as for the Chinese gentleman—" "What Chinese gentleman?" Fenton interjected blandly. Ambler paused. "You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?" he said at last. "Afraid not," Fenton said. "Was there someone else at your rendezvous, Tarquin? Something I need to be worried about? If you've got any reason to suspect a security lapse, I need to know." "Believe me, if I had, you'd be the first to hear," the American operative replied smoothly. "No, nothing like that. I appreciate your need to have observers in position." "But that's standard protocol," Fenton protested. "Not a problem. In stab operations, I usually knew the full complement, but that was then. Forgive an old jungle cat for being on edge. Really, it's nothing to be concerned about." "Good," Fenton said. His success had come from his capacity for narrow-bore focus, which meant he would not be distracted by details he could deem irrelevant. "I was worried about you for a moment, but you've lived up to your reputation. I'm very pleased. You did the job, did it swiftly and cleanly, showed resourcefulness, swiftness, top-notch decision-making skills, executive caliber. Fact is, I think you've got a future in my inner circle, top of the org chart. Mind you, there are no desk jockeys at SSG. The people who have a bird's-eye view of everything have got to be raptors themselves. That's my philosophy." He stopped, raised a hand. "But I haven't forgotten our conversation outside the Palais de Congrès. There was stuff you wanted to find out." I'm told that you had powerful enemies and powerful friends, and it seems I was right. I spoke to my principal partner at State, and clearly there is a story to be told, but they won't tell it to me. A matter of information partition, which is fine, I can respect that. Good news is the principal has agreed to a face-to-face meeting with you. Promises to fill you in completely. We'll schedule it as soon as we can, maybe even here. Who's the principal? I promise not to say, not yet. One thing you'll learn about me, Tarquin, is that I'm a man of my word. And I'm holding you to it, Ambler snapped. Damn it, Fenton. I told you I was to be paid with knowledge. You think you can fob off a checks-in-the-mail excuse like that? Fenton's ruddy face colored further. It's not like that, Tarquin, he said steadily. My partner very much wants to meet you, all the more now. That's going to happen within a matter of days. And it's not like you're going to be cooling your heels in the meantime. I know that an operative like you must be eager to get back to work. At this point, there's no assignment I wouldn't entrust you with. Not a lot in this world that's good as advertised, but you are, Tarquin, you are. What can I say? Ambler replied, neutrally. Ariadne's thread. Find where it leads. Got a real exciting project for you coming up, but don't pack your skis just yet. There's just one more assignment we've got for you here. One more. A man who really needs killing, Fenton said. Apologies for being so plain-spoken, but this one's going to be tricky. Tricky, the operative echoed. Tell you what else. A Consops Beyond Salvage order has already gone out on this guy. They've put their in-house best on it, and when the rubber hits the road, they still come to me. Because they can't leave anything to chance. You bring in Fenton, you're guaranteed of results, so now I'm putting my best on it, and that means you. Tell me more about the target. We're talking about somebody with top-notch skills and training, a high-flying covert ops ace gone bad. Sounds like trouble. You bet, about the worst thing that can happen. Who? Ambler asked simply. A sociopath who happens to have reams of government intel in his head because of his experience in the field and in the office. Fenton had a look of grave concern. First-hand knowledge of all kinds of government secrets, passcodes, operational procedures, you name it, and he's out of his mind. Every day this guy draws breath is the day his country is at risk. Thanks for narrowing it down, but I'll need to start with the name. Of course, Fenton said. The target's name is Harrison Ambler. The operative blanched. Fenton raised an eyebrow. You know him? Ambler struggled to breathe normally. Let's just say we have a history.